You know, we look at world maps all the time, right? But have you ever really looked at them? I mean, not just for directions, but at the actual names. It turns out those words we use every day, Africa, America, Asia, they aren't just labels. Oh no, they're a hidden story of ancient grammar, incredible voyages, and the empires that literally shaped our world. So let's dive in. Just for a second, picture that map in your head. Spin the globe. Take a look at the names of those giant landmasses. Do you see it? There's this strange, almost poetic pattern that connects almost all of them.
Take a look. It's kind of wild when you see it laid out like this. 5 of the 6 continents that we usually name start and end with the letter A. You've got Africa, America, Antarctica, Asia, and Australia. And then there's Europe, the odd one out. So what's going on here? Is that just a massive coincidence?
Yeah, spoiler alert, it is absolutely not random. It's a linguistic puzzle that takes us deep, deep into the history of how we even see our own planet. So let's start pulling on that thread. The answer isn't some modern rule or, some secret cartographer's club. It's an echo from a language that's been dead for centuries. It's a grammatical ghost that's been haunting our maps this whole time. And that ghost is Latin, the language of the Roman Empire, of medieval scholars, and, this is the crucial part, of the first European mapmakers who really started charting the whole world. Their grammar rules are, believe it or not, still on our maps today. Okay, here it is, the core of the whole mystery. In classical Latin, the word for land, terra, is a feminine noun. And in languages with grammatical gender, like Latin, other words have to agree with it.
So this creates this simple but incredibly powerful chain reaction. If the word for land, terra, is feminine, then any new land you discover has to get a feminine name to match. And the easiest way to do that in Latin? Just slap an A on the end. Since all the early mapmakers were using Latin as the international language of science, they just applied this rule again and again and again, creating the very pattern we see today.
But knowing the rule is only half the fun. Each continent's name has its own wild, unique journey. So let's open up the case files. Let's start with the 2 oldest names on the block, Europe and Asia. Their origins are just beautiful and simple. To ancient Akkadian sailors in Mesopotamia, Asia was just the land of the sunrise. It came from their word asu, for east. And Europe, well, that was the land of the sunset, from Arabu, for west. They were just practical directions.
Africa's story is all about expansion. See, the Romans conquered this small region in North Africa, right around modern Tunisia. They called it the land of the Afri, a local tribe, so Africa Terra. And over the centuries, as explorers mapped more and more of the continent, that tiny little provincial name just kept stretching and stretching until it covered the entire landmass.
And then we have the Americas, and the story we think we know. Columbus stubbornly insists he's in Asia. Then along comes the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, who has this huge breakthrough. Whoa, guys, this is a new world. So to honor him, a mapmaker named Martin Waldseemüller takes the Latin version of his name, Americus, and, yep, following that old grammatical ghost, gives it the feminine ending, America. Case closed, right?
Well, history is rarely that neat and tidy. While the Vespucci story is definitely the one we all get in school, there are some pretty fascinating alternate theories out there that throw a wrench in the whole narrative.
For instance, could the name have actually come from the Amerique Mountains in Nicaragua? That was an indigenous name and a known source of gold that sailors were already buzzing about. Or maybe, just maybe, it was named for Richard Americ, a super wealthy merchant who funded one of the first English voyages to North America. The debate is still very much alive.
All right, let's head down under. The credit for the name Australia usually goes to the navigator Matthew Flinders. After he became the first person to sail all the way around the continent, he officially proposed the name Australia back in 1804, basically arguing it just sounded better. It was more agreeable to the ear than something like New Holland.
Okay, but what if I told you that Flinders didn't actually invent that name? What if it showed up on a map more than 250 years before he was even born?
And this is just so cool because it shows how ideas stick around. Check this out. A German map from way back in 1545 used the name Australia for a totally theoretical southern continent. It all comes from this ancient Roman idea of terra australis incognita, the unknown southern land, which they just believed had to exist to balance out the globe. So Flinders didn't invent the name, he just put a legendary name onto a real place.
And that very idea, applying a name to a place, brings us to a really critical point in this whole story. Every name we've talked about so far was given by outsiders, by explorers, by scholars, by conquerors. But these continents weren't empty. They weren't just waiting around for a label. They already had names, given by the people who had lived there for thousands of years.
For many indigenous peoples of North America, their home is Turtle Island. That name comes from a powerful creation story, framing the continent as a living, sacred being. Across the Americas, the Guna people's term Abiyala, meaning land of life, has been adopted by many as a powerful, unifying name. And before the seas rose after the last ice age, the continent we call Australia was part of a much larger landmass, known to scientists as Sahul. Every one of these names tells a completely different story, one of a deep, profound connection to the land. So, after all of this, after all these twists and turns from Latin grammar to indigenous creation stories, what does it all mean? What are these names really?
They're linguistic fossils. That's what they are. Each one is like a perfectly preserved piece of history. They hold the ambitions of empires, the mistakes of explorers, the simple perspectives of ancient sailors, and the echoes of languages that haven't been spoken for 1,000 years. When you get right down to it, these names are the story of us. They reflect our long, messy, and absolutely incredible journey to try and make sense of this planet and figure out our place on it.
So, the next time you look at a map, I want you to do something different. Don't just see places, see the stories. And then ask yourself, if all these names are just stories we've inherited from the past, what new stories are our maps telling us right now, today?